Oh, there we go.
We're not supposed to be. Okay, let's start over again. Okay. Today we'll be talking about children's mental health. And we are with Fort Bend County Behavioral Health Services. Thank you for coming. This is Children's Mental Health Week. I'm Dr. Sue Profile, and this is Dr. Tanya Martin. I am a developmental psychologist that works for Fort Bend County Behavioral Health Services, and I work with young children and their families who are in the child welfare system.
And I'm Dr. Martin. Thank you all for coming. I also work for Fort Bend County Behavioral Health Services. I'm a licensed psychologist. I do court-ordered evaluations, but I also am the clinical supervisor for our juvenile diversion program. And those are all clients who are adolescents who are trying to divert away from the juvenile justice system.
Okay, so I will present first on young children, and then after I present, then Dr. Martin will present on older children. Thank you. Advance the slides. Right there. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll be talking about infant and early childhood mental health. You can see the objectives. So today's objectives, I'll be talking about what is infant mental health. That might be something new to you that you're not familiar with infant and early childhood mental health. We'll talk about why it's important, young children's well-being during COVID-19, typical challenges for infants and toddlers, things that normal children go through, and then developmental disabilities that some children go through. And then we'll finish up with what parents can do. And then on Monday, on May 10th, I will also give a presentation on supporting children's mental health and more tips for parents. So let's start with what is infant and early childhood mental health. So this has to do with children's development from birth to age 5. It takes place in the family, the community, and the culture that the child is in. So it's the child's ability to form close relationships, experience emotions, and explore and learn. If you think about young children between the ages of birth and 5 years old, there's a big difference in a child that is a newborn versus a 5-year-old. So their brain is developing, their body's developing. They really learn a lot in the first 5 years of life. So it's important because children have positive experiences and they have negative experiences. So I'll talk a little bit about each. So positive early experiences are things that the child experiences that are really good for the child. Most of these things happen within the family. And positive early experiences promote strong emotional health and mental health. Children also have negative early experiences. And so a negative early experience or a combination of negative early experiences really can impact a child's brain development. And I'll give some examples of this. Negative early experiences can also have harmful effects on development. So children develop in a lot of different ways, socially, emotionally, physically, language development, cognitive development. There's a lot of different types of development that can be affected by the child's early experiences. So with positive early experiences, I'll give some examples. So children playing with their parent is a positive early experience. Children having supportive adults in their life, children feeling safe and secure at home. That's a positive experience for a child. And parents can make sure that the children play. They play with their children by playing with toys, not having screen time as much as, you know, the interaction between the parent and the child, playing with toys, drawing, coloring, playing with, playing outside. There's a lot of different ways that parents can play with their children. And it really only takes one parent, one adult to really provide positive experiences for their child. So for example, I have a client who's a single mother and she's been reading to her child since he was just a few months old. And so she plays with him, she reads to him, she talks to him, they have eye contact. And so he's doing really well because his mother gives him so much positive attention. But for the negative early experiences, I have a couple of examples of that as well. So for negative examples, we have a client who is 1 year old and he's been living with his grandmother and he's in a playpen almost all day. So he's in a pack and play because the grandmother works all day. So she leaves him, next to her, but in a playpen because she's afraid that if he gets out and starts crawling and walking around, he'll get into things. So it's really not a good environment for him to be in a pack and play all day. So that's a negative early experience. Another child that I've been working with is 4, and he's been in foster care for over a year. And he was reading a book with his mother. He was with his biological mother reading a book, and he saw a police officer in the book, and he got really upset. And so I asked the parents what happened, and they said that he had been watching his older siblings play Grand Theft Auto before he was removed from their home. And so that's a negative early experience for that child. And I told the parents that really affected that child's brain, because now that child sees a police officer, even a picture of a police officer, and he got really upset. He said he wanted to punch him in the face. He wanted to throw a trash can at the police officer. And this was just a picture in a book. So you can see how a negative experience could really affect a child's brain. This could also impact school performance, because if a child is thinking these things and acting this way, when they get to school, they're going to have problems, behavior problems in school. So we'll also talk a little bit about young children's well-being during COVID-19. So a lot of children have had different experiences because of COVID-19. And so that's impacted their social, their emotional health, and their mental health. They've had different challenges during COVID-19. For example, changes in routine. If you think about a young child that used to get up and go to preschool or daycare, they would get up at a certain time and they would have a routine. Well, now with COVID-19, they might not be in school. They might have a different sleep schedule, different eating schedule, different caregivers, and they might also have a break in their continuity of care or learning. So sometimes schools or daycares would close. And so then they had to have, homeschooling, even if they were young. They also have break in continuity of healthcare, which means that some parents aren't taking their children to doctor's appointments, child checkups, maybe not getting vaccinated because of COVID. Children also have missed certain life events. They've missed birthdays, birthday parties, vacations, births, funerals because of this. And then the last thing that could have an impact on the children is a loss of security or safety. This might have to do with housing. If the parents had economic troubles, maybe lost their job, they might not have housing, transportation, they might not have access to healthy food that they used to. A couple of my coworkers have talked to me about their young children and what they have had happen to their young children. So one little boy is 3 and his daycare closed. And he was in this daycare since he was 10 weeks old. And now there's no daycare for him. And his parents both work. So he had to start staying home, and they were trying to change their schedule so that they could stay home with their 3-year-old. Another child is 4 and she didn't go to pre-K. So she was going to start preschool and she didn't start preschool because of COVID. These 2 children also have missed life events. They've missed birthdays. The little girl that's 4, she missed her ballet classes that she really liked having ballet class. And the 3-year-old boy, he had his birthday party at a car dealership, which I guess he really likes the car dealership. So that's good. I guess he had fun. And so they went to the car dealership and he got to sit in some cars for about 45 minutes. And then they went home and they had a Zoom birthday party with their relatives. And so just little events like that to try to figure out how to have a birthday party, for a young child that's missing out on those things. So what can parents do about things like this? So parents can recognize and address fear and stress. Children as young as age 2 can feel distress due to parent stress. Preschool children can worry about their parents getting sick because of COVID. They don't really understand. Some children were born during COVID and every adult they've seen is wearing a mask. So think about what it looks like for those children. Parents can also teach and reinforce prevention actions. So preventive things to not get COVID, wearing masks, washing their hands regularly, and teaching their children about these. Parents can also help keep children healthy by attending doctor's appointments, child checkups, and getting the child vaccinated or just immunizations. And then parents can help children stay socially connected. So sometimes it's really hard if they can't play with their friends. They can get to know their family better by having Zoom visits with family members. It's really hard for young children to really stay on Zoom or to stay on virtual visits with family or friends because they just can't sit still that long. So it's difficult for kids. So infants and toddlers have typical challenges that all children face. These include separation anxiety. Separation anxiety varies from child to child. It usually starts at about 8 or 9 months, peaks at about age 1, and it's when a child is really distressed because they separate from their caregivers. So the child might cry, they might cling. It makes it difficult for their parents to leave them with a new babysitter or leave them at a daycare. And so it's the best thing for parents to do for separation anxiety is to be honest with the child. Say goodbye. Don't just leave the house without the child knowing it, and talk to the child about it, but just quickly. And then the parents, need to leave, and the child will get through the separation anxiety. Related to that is stranger anxiety, where the children are afraid of strangers right about that same age. And so some children experience it a little bit earlier. Some children never really experience it, but it's really typical for children to be afraid of strangers. When the child is really young, like a few months old, you can pass a child around a room. You could take a baby and it could go to everybody in the room and be happy. But when they hit about 9 months to 12 months, that child just doesn't want to go to anybody. If they see a stranger, they're going to cry. And that's really typical behavior. Another typical behavior is wanting independence. So if you think about a toddler, they learn to say no, one of their first words, and they'll say, I do it, or by myself. And so it's really good for children to want to be independent, but it's difficult for parents because it's frustrating. The child might put their shoes on the wrong feet. They might want to tie their shoes, but they don't know how to tie their shoes. They might put their pants on backwards. And so it's just frustrating because the parents probably just want to just do it themselves and get it over with. And it might take longer to get ready in the morning with a child who wants to be independent, but still needs help. And so that could be frustrating, but it's really typical. Parents also need to help their children manage their emotions. We call this regulation of emotions, and children learn how to self-regulate, but at first they need their parents to help them regulate their emotions because the children get really upset, they get frustrated, and they don't know how to use their words yet, right? Because they're just learning how to talk. And so they're just trying to figure out how to express themselves. So young children express themselves by crying, by being frustrated. They might hit because they don't know what else to do. So parents need to really work on that to get children to use their words. But that takes a while for children to get to that point. Usually that they learn that in preschool. Preschool teachers will say that a lot, and parents will say that a lot to kids about ages 3 and 4 when they can start to use their words to express their feelings. The next is toilet training, probably one of the hardest things for parents to go through with young children. I think pushing it on children makes it harder for everybody and it gets frustrating. And so the experts say that parents should wait until the children are ready. And so sometimes that is age 3, and sometimes parents want to have it done before then. But I think it's a lot easier to wait until the child is ready, and then the child isn't pushing back on it so much that they don't want to do it. And then the last one is peer and sibling conflict. Again, this is really typical. Children don't want to share their toys because they don't want to. Why would they want to share their toys? Because they're playing with them and it's theirs, and they don't want anybody else to have their toys. So parents really need to teach children how to play and how to share and how to deal with conflict. And so a lot of times siblings will tell on each other, they hit each other, and the parents don't know who starts it. And so parents just really need to work on how to handle the conflict, and then eventually get the children to work on their own conflict so that they can learn how to deal with conflict themselves. And then next, some children have developmental disabilities. And this is a group of conditions due to impairment in physical, learning, language, behavior areas. So it's when a child is impaired in one of these areas, that could be a developmental disability. It impacts day-to-day functioning, and it usually lasts throughout a lifetime. And so usually children start to have developmental milestones where they start crawling, they start walking, they start waving goodbye. And so parents should realize that the children are starting to do these different developmental milestones, but they don't always happen at the same age. So for each of these milestones, there's a range. So it's not like all children have to walk at a certain age. They all don't walk at 12 months. That's like an average. So they might walk earlier, they might walk later. But if parents are concerned about the child not meeting their milestones or some of their milestones, they can talk to the pediatrician. They could get a developmental screening, which is a test to see if the child is learning their skills when they should, or if they have a delay. So developmental disabilities occur in all racial, all ethnic, and all socioeconomic status groups, which is income groups. 1 in every 6 children aged 3 to 17 years has a developmental disability. These include attention deficit hyperactive disorder, autism spectrum disorder, hearing loss or vision impairment, intellectual disability, learning disability, or cerebral palsy. And some of these are genetic, some are brought on by environmental situations. So there's different causes for these. They happen at different ages. And so there's a lot of different things that parents need to be looking for in their child's development. So what can parents do? So parents can play, show warmth, listen, reassure, and be consistent. So parent-child play is really important for children, for the parents to get on the floor and play with their young children. In my office, I have a couple of playrooms where I bring parents and children in together to play. And sometimes I take the chairs out of the room so that the parents have to sit on the floor and play with their children. And so some parents feel really uncomfortable playing with their children. Some parents are really good at it. I've done research where we found that fathers are better at playing with their children than mothers, especially for physical play. Sometimes mothers get kind of nervous when the fathers, start throwing the kids around a little bit too much. But fathers are usually really good at it, and mothers are, a little bit different in the way that they play with their kids. Parents need to show warmth and affection to their kids and just be responsive, talk warmly to their kids. It's really important to have warmth and also to have control with their children. Parents need to listen to their children, understand their children's cues. Even infants can show their parents when they're hungry, when they want something, when they're tired. And so parents need to start to understand that, even if the children can't talk yet. And they need to, really have conversations with their children and listen to what their children are saying. Parents need to reassure their children. A lot of kids have fears. A lot of kids are scared of things. I think every child is probably afraid of something. And sometimes they have nightmares. I remember when my son was probably 5 years old, he would wake up in the middle of the night and just scream. And so I would run upstairs and see what was wrong. And he would say that there was animals in his bed. And there's always a different animal. Like sometimes it was ants in his bed. Sometimes it was lions. He just had all these different animals in his bed. So I would turn on the lights and pull down the covers and show him that there were no animals in his bed. And I would reassure him that, he can go back to sleep and everything would be okay. Instead of just saying, there's no animal, just go back to bed. You kind of have to show him that there's really not. And then the last thing that parents should do is be consistent, which is really important for parents, but it's really hard to be consistent all the time because parents have a lot of rules. And then sometimes they have the children follow the rules. Sometimes the children don't follow the rules and the parents don't see everything. And parents get tired too. So parents know that they need to be consistent and always do the same thing, but sometimes it's just hard and tiring. But children really need consistency and they need rules. They need to have that routine and that structure. And parents need to decide what they want to do for their children and then really stick to that to be consistent. So we'll just move on to Dr. Martin and childhood and adolescent mental.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Profile. So I'm going to cover childhood and adolescent mental health, which technically is quite a large age range. It's technically ages 5 to about 17. But I will try to kind of give different examples of different age ranges. I'm going to talk specifically about some different mental health symptoms and mental health conditions within this age range. So Dr. Profile talked a little bit about children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And in children, especially in COVID-19, they've had to do virtual learning now. And so there are some unique challenges with children and adolescents who do have these developmental disabilities that they have to face that they perhaps did not have to do previously. So some examples are, now they are responsible for checking their grades when, on a particular virtual platform, when before they did not have to do that. Turning in assignments at different times or on different days, and then doing assignments without the presence of a teacher or a teacher's aide. So all of these things are very, very difficult for them because they are used to having teachers or a teacher's aide there to help them, give them reminders. And so now, especially because, parents now at home, they have to kind of be working, and also teachers' aides as well at home. Sometimes the parents may not have the time or forget to kind of tell their child to make sure you check your grades and make sure you're turning in your assignments. So we have a lot of challenges that are very unique to these children and adolescents. Also, the socialization piece is very important. These children already have some challenges in making connections with same age peers. And so now, because especially at the top of the pandemic, they are no longer able to communicate and to socialize with their friends and with their peer group. So now we see some further deficits in those areas, as well as you can see perhaps some children having some sadness or some depression around not being able to see their children or not being able to see their friends as much. And then, of course, there are the parent challenges, like I was alluding to. Some parents, they're just not able to provide that assistance that their children might need in order to complete various tasks in terms of virtual learning. So just some resources. For example, we actually have a client right now in our juvenile diversion program who does have an intellectual disability, and she's been having the same exact issue in terms of remembering to complete her assignments and then remembering to check her grades. So some things that we have been helping her mom with is to kind of giving her reminders to reach out to the client's teachers, school caseworkers, guidance counselors, because those are the people they really want to see, especially children with developmental disabilities. They really want to see them succeed because they know firsthand the exact challenges that these particular children are having. So reach out to them, let them know specifically what the child is having an issue with, and they'll be more than happy to help out parents with that. As far as reaching out to parents with same age children for support, maybe getting ideas from those parents on, what seems to be working with your child in turning in assignments or completing assignments. That also can help a lot. And then seeing a pediatrician or a psychiatrist. What we've seen with also that client that has an intellectual disability is that because she's not able to see her friends, she's actually developed some moderate depressive symptoms. So what helped her was that she went to see her pediatrician. Her pediatrician prescribed her an antidepressant, and she is feeling a lot better. And she is a little bit more motivated to complete her assignments and should make sure she's checking her work. Now, is that going to be the case for all children? No, but for some children, it might assist them in completing their assignments. And then I have here the token economy system. That actually is a technique that it can be used sometime in therapy. And it's basically a reward system. So you kind of set up different tasks for the child that they can do. So for example, maybe they have to check their grades every day at 2 p.m. That's what they have, that's their target. And if they do that Monday through Friday, then they get some kind of reward at the end of the week. And of course, it has to be a reward that they actually want, because if they don't want it, then they're not going to do the task. But for our client, for example, is that she can go to see a movie, or she can go and get a manicure done or something like that. And in that way, and you can make a physical representation of it too. So make like a poster board, make it kind of, attractive in terms of the colors and putting like stars and things like that on there. So making it engaging, and then also making it a project that they would want to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about depression and then as well anxiety. These two conditions are the two most common conditions in the United States. So I also wanted to talk about it in the context of children and adolescents. So first, I'm going to talk about depression and general sadness and how to tell the difference in children and adolescents. So when we look at the symptoms for depression, depression really creeps into every aspect of a child or adolescent's life. So it affects their sleep, it affects their appetite, it affects, their willingness to engage with others. It can affect, of course, their mood, so having a low or an irritable mood. And then also with depression, you're more likely to see more significant symptoms such as suicidal thoughts or plans. So that's certainly more of a sign of depression rather than sadness. Sadness, you can think about it in terms of the length. Sadness is kind of more of a sprinter. So it's more likely to happen in short kind of time periods, whereas depression is more of a distance runner. So it can happen over long periods of time, sometimes over a month, sometimes over 2 months. Depression does not always have a trigger, whereas sadness does. If you talk to individuals, children or adolescents who do have a major depressive disorder, they'll tell you, that I don't know when or what makes me sad. And they're not just trying to ignore you or trying to push you away. Sometimes they might be, but sometimes they really can't identify what exactly is the trigger. And that sometimes happens. Depression also very much is a neurological and a medical condition. There's been research that shows that individuals with depression will have different serotonin levels in their brain. And so different medications will affect those particular serotonin levels. As I said before, depression, you'll see kind of disruption in eating and sleeping patterns. You'll see those disruptions in sadness as well, but it will look different. So, for example, a child who is sad, they might eat food kind of as a comfort thing. So they might eat like some cookies or some chips for comfort. Whereas a child with depression, they're more likely to lose interest completely in eating, or they'll eat very irregularly. Also for depression, we see sometimes some significant weight loss or gain, or you'll see a complete insomnia or hypersomnia. So oversleeping, sleeping, for example, 10 or 12 hours, they wake up and they're still feeling tired. Just some additional differences between sadness and depression. So kids who are experiencing depression will feel little to no joy at all. So they're unable to really recall times when they even felt happy or inspired. A child who is sad, they can at least probably tell you a time when they did feel happy. But those who are depressed, it's really hard for them to pinpoint the last time that they felt happy. Sadness is also it's very much easier alleviated rather than depression. So sadness can be alleviated by hanging out with friends, someone doing a nice gesture for them. Whereas someone or a child that has depression, those things are very unlikely to actually change their mood. In terms of hereditary, depression often is hereditary, whereas sadness is not. So we'll see that a child or adolescent who has, say, a mother or a father with a history of depression, it's not unlikely to perhaps see then some depressive symptoms within the child as well. And then we'll see a lot of self-blaming and self-harming also in kids with depression. Unlikely to see that in kids with sadness, but certainly with depression, we'll see some self-harming. Sometimes they'll use really anything sharp. And then also self-blaming. And we'll see the blaming too with things that maybe to us don't make sense. What we call that in mental health, we call that inappropriate guilt. So they'll feel guilty for things that really are not in actuality their fault. Just some additional differences, all kids feel sad, but not all kids are going to experience depression. Sadness usually lasts for only a few days or a few weeks. And again, it's easier for kids who are sad to actually pinpoint the trigger. For kids who are sad, they're of course going to have that low mood, and it's likely to see a little bit more in adults. For kids and adolescents, you're actually more likely to see irritability and anger when they're depressed or anxious. And sometimes that can be a little confusing to some adults, say like teachers who work with them every day. But that irritability and anger can happen. There was actually, if you watched our youth panel on Monday, there was a youth, I believe she was talking more about anxiety, but she was talking about how when she gets irritable with her mother, say like in the store or something, then her mom knows that she's not just kind of being a brat to her or being disrespectful, that she's feeling really anxious, and that's actually making her irritable. So that actually is quite common in kids with depression and anxiety. We'll see some isolation, but not for an extended period of time in kids who are sad, and then they may use substances to cope. Now, children with depression, you're more likely to see some more significant symptoms. So it may last, and symptoms may last for months or even years. You'll see that they no longer find enjoyable activities that they once liked. And then they will use heavy drug use, usually to cope. And usually that drug use will include alcohol abuse. So moving on to anxiety, and I know I've touched on a couple things, couple of symptoms, but moving on to anxiety in children and adolescents. So what it looks like and the co-occurring conditions. So anxiety is really fear, worry, or dread that impairs a child's ability to function. And it's important to note that this fear or worry is out of proportion to the actual trigger. So it's very normal for kids, for example, kids or adolescents to get up in front of a group of people and give a presentation or to speak. A lot of kids and adolescents have that worry, and that's okay. That's completely normal. What we're thinking of, though, is that, say, if a child is constantly throwing up and having sweats and they can't even walk if they have to do a presentation, that's where you're looking more at signs or symptoms of anxiety. Anxiety often accompanies depression as well. And what we'll see is that a lot of times both conditions can kind of worsen each other. So sometimes kids with anxiety will get so down on themselves that they can't seem to control their anxiety. So that actually makes them further sad or depressed and down about their own abilities to address their anxiety. Some anxiety is normal, like I was saying. It's normal for kids to get a little nervous to speak in front of others. It's normal for toddlers to become a little fearful of strangers when they're separated from their mother. And that anxiety is kind of what we call good anxiety, or, it's healthy anxiety, because those are the things that keep you on your toes. It keeps you alert. And so that's the kind of anxiety that you want. What we don't want, of course, is what impairs our ability to function on a daily basis. So what exactly can anxiety look like in children and adolescents? What we see is the most common sign of anxiety is often school refusal. And so the refusal can accompany separation anxiety, social anxiety, a panic disorder, and then of course, bullying going on at school can also happen. Some additional signs are also somatic symptoms. So if your child or adolescent is complaining constantly about stomach aches or headaches, when usually they don't have those symptoms, that can sometimes be a sign of anxiety. And that anxiety can be also, again, towards school, or it can be towards other specific situations. So just some example statements of anxiety. I'm worried I'll never see you again, or I'm worried that kids will laugh at me. So the first can be an example of separation anxiety. The second can be an example of social anxiety. Anxiety often, as I said, will co-occur with a lot of other conditions. So not only depression, but also trauma, ADHD, autism, eating disorders, and other disorders. As I said before, depression and anxiety can often worsen each other. Some kids that have anxiety will feel like they have a lack of control. And that piece actually can be tied to a lot of different conditions too. So it can be tied to trauma. It can be tied certainly to eating disorders. It can be tied to separation from biological parents in that early childhood period. It can be tied to a lot of different triggers and stressors in the child's life. And then trauma and PTSD, we can see kids who do have a history of significant trauma, and that can be any form of abuse or neglect. Sometimes they'll have extreme worry that in encountering the trauma again, especially say if they're in the CPS or foster care system, or anything that could be a trauma reminder. And this here, I mean, we could probably do a whole separate presentation on that. But that here is why a lot of kids in the CPS and foster care system will have what we call externalizing behavior. So they'll have a lot of irritability, they'll have a lot of physical fighting either one another or fighting adults. It's because of just that trauma and how it has affected their mood, their behavior, and just the way that they see and interact with the world. So that actually is what we have on mental health conditions for children and adolescents, and then also early childhood, infant early childhood. We want to take this time to kind of answer any questions that you guys might have. Yes.
Talking about children with disability. Where can you get a test? I think it said pediatrician, so you just go to your pediatrician and they will know what's good for you.
Yeah, so are you talking about intellectual disability? Okay.
She was talking about certain months.
Right.
Walking is all not always
Yeah. So often what happens is that parents will take their child to their pediatrician, and then the pediatrician will make a referral to say a private practice or here in Fort Bend County, Texana, the Mental Health Authority, they also do IDD evaluations. So that can be a way for parents to kind of get that evaluation for their child. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is the school district would help too. So a lot of school districts, when the children are young, you can contact your local school district and then they could probably give you more information too.
No one else has
it. I see your list over there. So if you just want to run them on down.
So I've seen the increase with anxiety. I saw the depression and anxiety states, but the fear of because I have some children, 3 children, 2 of them, they don't want to leave the house. We told them COVID is out there.
Yes.
If you get COVID, you have to go to the hospital, you might have to get shot. So
you told them that?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
this is true.
We'll also talk about that later.
So, so they wanted to understand why it didn't go to
Okay.
So that have y'all seen an increase in it? Should I give them some little help now that I probably scared them from talking to people?
You want to take that? I can also respond. Okay. Okay. I'll say, so I also work at a private practice that works with children and adolescents, and we have seen an increase in children and their anxiety specifically about COVID-19. Now, what I would say as a parent is certainly to be very observant about your child's behavior. And so know kind of what's normal in terms of, how they react to certain nervous kind of triggering events. And if you notice some, significantly kind of out of the norm behavior, I would first talk with them. And you want to talk with them and validate their feelings. That a lot of kids their age are feeling the same exact thing that they are. You want to talk about, let them tell you kind of what they're feeling as well. And then you want to give them the reality, but you also want to assure them that, you as your parent, you're taking certain assurances to make sure that they're safe. Because that's what they need. They need to feel, of course, safety, and feel like they'll be able to live a healthy life out in the community, right? So that's what I would say first. Now, and you probably have to have those talks maybe more than once with them. And then if you feel like they're still significantly anxious, then maybe you can see about like maybe if they need to see a therapist or counselor. Mhm. Did you add anything?
I think that's great. I guess the only thing I would add to is just to keep the discussion age appropriate with the child, so that if you're talking to a not that you're not, but if you're talking to a 3 or 4-year-old, keep it at their level. They might have some questions because of the, things that they see with people wearing masks and, what are germs? And, I've heard, different parents give different explanations for things like that. So I think just not to, go talk to advance to a young child, keep it at their level and keep it to what they're interested in learning about, and not give them too much information that they don't need to have.
That's what I would say.
If no one else has a question.
Absolutely.
So when about the age range that the anxiety will have for public speaking? Because I don't know, my family, we put people on the spot. That's what we found.
Okay.
So if you not dancing, but just knowing facts, so we'll take a tell these people what you know about it, right? They look like a big deal. So what age, because I heard you say that a lot of kids have public speaking, fear of strangers. What age should it go away?
Now, public speaking, it's very interesting because it may never go away, actually. So I know a few adults, 60, 70, who are still nervous and have been talking in front of others. I could only say what helped me is that I just had to force myself to do it. There was a time, in grad school when I was doing like multiple presentations a week. So for me, I'm not nervous really doing it, but there are some people who definitely, I'm also not prone to anxiety. So there are people certainly though, who are prone to anxiety, and they don't also have that practice. So those individuals, they will have to maybe have a little bit more practice. And then also do what they have to do to kind of reduce their anxiety. But for some people, it never goes away. Sure.
I know me personally, I still get super anxious with presentations, and I find like I have to, like my preparation is kind of like that self-care, making sure like I'm consistent with like my exercising and just making sure I am really aware of what I'm presenting helps. So I think it took until getting through college for me not to pretty much black out and forget what I was saying during my presentations. So it takes a while for some people, and some people, like they said, it just go away.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure I'm in my right kind of development stages.
Right. No. Like I said, it's very common for teenagers to be nervous. And it's okay actually if they're nervous, because when you have a little anxiety, it keeps you on your toes. You don't want to be up here and then someone's asking you a question, and because you're so lackadaisical, you don't even know what they asked you, So you want to have a little bit of healthy anxiety to keep you on your toes. But and then for teenagers that are a little nervous, practice definitely helps. That definitely helps to calm nerves. A lot of practice. Okay. Those are really good questions. Yes. Yeah, those are really good. Does anyone else or do we have any questions coming through online or? No? Okay.
I have a question. So managing anxiety in a young child who is now having to start kindergarten in the era of COVID. So you're dealing with the kind of normal anxiety of starting school, and on top of that, starting during the pandemic. So what kind of suggestions do you have for helping, a little one kind of merge those fears and manage that as they're starting school soon.
So good. I'm gonna let you take it away.
Yes, so I think at any time, it's really good for children to meet somebody that's going to be in their class for kindergarten. And so we've done research on this where we found that when a child is familiar with even just one person in their kindergarten class, it really makes a big difference in how they adjust to kindergarten. So if you can find somebody that's going to be in the same class and then, have some play dates, then I think that really helps the child to adjust to school. So I think it has to be, harder during COVID, like you said. So I think meeting the teacher ahead of time is really good. I remember when my daughter started kindergarten, it wasn't COVID, but she didn't want to go to school. She wanted to stay home and watch the garbage men go by. And we said, no, you're going to school. And she had gone to preschool, but she didn't want to go to kindergarten. But then we had meet the teacher night before school started. And I think once she saw the classroom and she saw the teacher, I think a lot of that anxiety just went away because she just knew what to expect. So I think the more that you can help them understand what school is like and, what to expect, if they can see the classroom, if they can meet the teacher, meet some of the children, I think that'll help a lot. Yeah. And just be there for her after she starts because it could be a difficult transition. So.
That's a good point. Any other questions? They're all really good. If not, that's all we have. We really appreciate you all coming out and then of course, everyone online. If you all have any other questions or anything, I believe our presentation is probably going to be on our website. And you can always contact our office if anyone has any lingering questions.
Or I think even ask questions on Facebook if that's
Oh, yeah.
if that's still up there. I think it should be recorded. So,
Okay, yeah, or on Facebook. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.